to the Republican presidential debate. On to the next round of questions. Sandra.
All right, let's get started. Senator Santorum, to you first. President Obama has urged technology leaders to make it hard for terrorists to use technology to escape from justice. Hillary Clinton says social media companies can help by swiftly shutting down terrorist accounts. The companies say that they're already working with law enforcement, and any proposed legislation would do more harm than good. Should companies like Facebook and Twitter be required by law to be more actively engaged in fighting terror?
I would just say that if we were doing a better job within the government, we wouldn't need the private sector to do the things that we're asking them to do. I've had a little experience in this in the private sector myself, and what I found was a government with layers and layers of bureaucracy, of people who had some technical expertise, but they had no authority, number one. And one of the things I found about in the bureaucracy is if a lot of people have authority, nobody has authority, number one. And number two, that if you don't do anything, you don't get fired. It's only when you do something and something goes wrong, you get fired. So they do nothing. And that's what's happening in our Defense Department right now. We have a capability that they're trying to develop to play defense. We have a lot of technologists that are very skilled, and they're trying to figure out how to play defense. But what we don't have is we don't have folks who are thinking about offense. We don't have war fighters. We have technologists. Technologists are not war fighters. Technologists are thinking, how do I protect cybersecurity? How do I secure? How do I protect? And we need to have a much more dynamic, how do we go after them? How do we respond? And we need leadership that's willing to make sure that when someone attacks us, and ladies and gentlemen, they're attacking us as we speak. They're attacking us all day, every day, not just the government, but they're attacking private sector companies all day, every day. They have to learn that they're going to pay a price when they do so. And then right now, just like in every other aspect of our national security, people who attack us are not paying the price. We need a leader who will make sure that they know when they mess with America, they're going to pay a price.
Senator, would you require anything of those companies like Facebook and Twitter if you were president?
Look, Facebook and Twitter can teach us things. We can cooperate with them. We can share ideas and information. But this is a very dicey area for the government to go in and require the industry to do its job. It needs to develop that capability. We need to have responsible dialogue. But I don't think requirements are the order of the day.
Thank you, Senator.
Ms. Fiorina, the president has just issued an executive order to expand gun laws and background checks. Now, none of you on stage agree with this, but recent polls show the majority of Americans are in favor of universal background checks.
Not in this room.
It's the poll data. So
and we all believe the poll data all the time, don't we?
So tell me. Why, in your view, is the president's proposal a problem?
Oh, it's a problem for so many reasons. First of all, it is yet another lawless executive order. You see, he doesn't like the fact that Congress has rejected his ideas twice on a bipartisan basis, so he's decided he just gets to override them. Sorry, Mr. President, not the way the Constitution works. Secondly, he basically admitted in that speech that he hasn't been paying much attention to enforcing the laws we have. He said, gee, we need a few more FBI agents. That would have helped perhaps stop a tragedy here in South Carolina with Dylan Roof, a guy who clearly never should have been sold a gun. In other words, Mr. President, you're right. We need to enforce the laws we have. Let's enforce the laws we have. There are criminals running around with guns who shouldn't have them. We don't prosecute any of them. Less than 1%. But I want to go back to the technology issue for a moment, if I may, as well, because in this regard, I disagree with Senator Santorum. Look, I come from the technology industry, and I can tell you there is one thing that bureaucracies don't know how to do. They do not know how to innovate. We have come 7 generations of technology since 2011. We have bureaucracies that are incapable of bringing in that innovation. So yes, there's some very specific things that we should ask the private sector to help us with, including making sure we have the latest and greatest in algorithms to search through all these databases so that we find terrorists before they attack us, not after it's too late. And finally, we need a president who understands technology in the Oval Office. Mrs. Clinton, actually, you cannot wipe a server with a towel.
Ms. Fiorina, you said that when you were CEO of HP, you actually worked with the government to try and combat some of these terrorist threats.
As CEO of Hewlett-Packard, I was asked very specifically for some very real help. The help I was asked to provide, this is now public information, so I'm not revealing something that once was classified. We had a very large shipment of equipment, software and hardware, headed to a retail outlet. And I was called by the head of the NSA, who had an urgent need for that capability to begin laying out a program to track terrorists. We turned that truck around on a highway, and it was escorted to the headquarters of NSA. In World War II, our government went to the private sector and said, help us do things that we cannot do. The private sector has capabilities that the government does not have. There are some legal authorities that are required. The Sony attack could have been detected and repelled had legal authorities been passed in Congress allowing private networks and public networks to work together. Those legal authorities have not yet been passed. Yes, I was asked to help. I know the technology industry, they will help again, but they must be asked by a president who understands what they have.
Ms. Fiorina, thank you.
All right, Governor Huckabee, you've called President Obama's executive orders on gun control unconstitutional and completely insane.
Yes, I did.
You've even told gun store owners to ignore the president's orders. Yet innocent people are dying from gun violence in cities like Detroit, Chicago, and Charleston every day. Is there anything that can be done at the federal level to prevent guns from falling into the hands of criminals?
Well, why don't we start by making sure the Justice Department never does an idiotic program like Fast and Furious, where the U.S. government put guns in the hands of Mexican drug lords and end up killing one of our border agents. You know, they want to talk about law-abiding citizens. I just find it amazing. The president keeps saying the gun show loophole. There is no gun show loophole. I promise you I've been to more gun shows than President Obama, and I bought more weapons at them, and you fill out forms. The president also says things that it's easier to get a gun than it is groceries. Again, I purchased guns, and I can assure you that it is much more difficult to purchase a firearm than it is to get the ingredients of a salad at the supermarket. What the president keeps pushing are ideas that have never worked. Ideas that would not have stopped San Bernardino, Sandy Hook, Aurora. And at some point you wonder, if you keep retrying things that don't work, maybe we should just see if we could resell all those used lottery tickets that didn't work real well, because that's the logic of just keep doing the same thing with something that has failed. Of course we want to stop gun violence, but the one common thing that has happened in most mass shootings is that they happened in gun-free zones where people who would have been law-abiding citizens, who could have stood up and at least tried to stop it, were not allowed to under the law.
Thank you, Governor Huckabee.
Governor Huckabee, an American in San Bernardino, murdered 14 people, while terrorists with Belgium and French passports murdered 130 people. We're facing a threat within our borders and from outside the United States. Those European terrorists, they could have come here at any time, given that we have a visa waiver program that enables people to travel back and forth. It exists with those countries and 36 others. If countries around the world, including many in Europe, cannot ensure that their citizens are not jihadists, why are we waiving the visa requirement at all?
Well, we shouldn't be. And that's one of the reasons that I think there are a lot of voices in our country who are saying it's time to relook at the visa program. The European Union is a failure. It's not allowed for even the economic goals that they were trying to achieve. But what we're now seeing is that it's making Europe less safe, and it's proven not to be exactly what they all thought it was going to be. Our first and foremost responsibility in this country, and the first responsibility of the President of the United States, is protect America and protect Americans. We have a president who seems to be more interested in protecting the reputation and image of Islam than he is protecting us. And I want to be very clear that when this president makes comments like he did the other night that we have to be so careful because we don't want to offend Muslims, he needs to read his own FBI crime stats from last year, which would show him that of the hate crimes in the country, over 5,500, about 1,100 were religious hate crimes. And of those, 58% were directed toward Jews, only 16% directed toward Muslims. Maybe what the president should have talked about the other night is how we ought to be more careful in the anti-Semitic comments that are going toward American Jews than toward Muslims, because by 3 times as many, they're being targeted for religious hate crimes.
If you get rid of the visa waiver program, does that shut down international commerce?
It does not shut down international commerce, but it may slow it down. And you know what? A slowed down commerce that is making us safer is worth it. This lady who came and joined with the San Bernardino killer had passed 3 background checks, and that's why a lot of Americans didn't buy it when the president said, we'll bring in Syrian refugees, but don't worry, we'll check them out. We have a lot of confidence in a president who told us that we could keep our doctor, we could keep our health insurance, it'd cost us less, and now the latest is, if you like your gun, you can keep it too, and frankly, we don't buy it. We don't believe it. He's lost his credibility, and his inept inability to work with Congress and pass legislation has led him to do what I never even imagined doing as a governor, and that's just going and doing it my own way. That's why we elect a president, is to lead, is to be able to shepherd things through. And if I can do it with a 90% Democrat legislature in Arkansas, there's no excuse for any president not being able to lead in Washington if he knows what the heck he's doing when he gets there.
Thank you, Governor Huckabee.
Senator Santorum, many of our military leaders believe America's critical infrastructure is vulnerable to a terrorist attack. This is the power in our homes, the water we drink, the internet and phone systems by which we stay connected. If attacked, these essential services that underpin American society could come to a grinding halt. Do you have a specific plan to protect us from this type of attack?
Well, the most devastating attack that could occur is an electromagnetic pulse attack, and that would be an attack that would be triggered by a nuclear explosion in the upper atmosphere of our country. The best way to stop that from happening is to make sure that those who are contemplating and actually wargaming and talking about using it, Iran, doesn't get a nuclear weapon so they can't explode that device. And the President of the United States has put Iran on a path to a nuclear weapon. And we have done nothing to do anything to harden our grid. There's actually a bill in Congress that would put money forward to try to put redundancy and harden our electric grid so it could actually survive an EMP. An EMP is a devastating explosion that sends a pulse that knocks out all electric, everything that's connected to any kind that's wired, that is a circuit board, gets fried out. Everything is gone. Cars stop. Planes fall out of the sky. This is a devastating attack. And this president has done nothing, number one, to take the most probable country to launch an attack and stop them, and has done nothing to try to defend us, particularly our electric grid. The bottom line is, I put the original sanctions on the Iranian nuclear program when I was in the United States Senate. I've been fighting for 12 years with one thing in mind, that we must stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And because they're different than every other country. They do not want a nuclear weapon to defend themselves. They want a nuclear weapon for theological ends, to bring about their Mahdi so they can control the world. And that is the most serious threat facing this country right now.
Santorum, I want to stay with you on this, moving to jobs and the economy. In his State of the Union address the other night, President Obama touted his record on jobs, citing more than 14 million new jobs, and boasted of nearly 900,000 manufacturing jobs added in the past 6 years. Do you dispute his track record of creating jobs?
Well, the numbers just don't add up. I mean, they have not added manufacturing jobs. Manufacturing jobs have been lost in this country, 2 million of them. The bottom line is that this president has done more to take jobs away from the hardworking people who are struggling the most. And that's folks who are, as I said, the 74% of Americans who don't have a college degree. And they're out there talking about, well, we're going to provide free college for everybody. Well, who's going to pay for it? The 74% that don't have a college degree. They're not. Nobody's focused. Let's just be honest. Nobody's focused on the people who are struggling the most in America today. We talk about immigration. Talk about the president's immigration plan. He wants to bring in more and more people into this country. Let people who are here illegally stay in this country. Almost all of the people who are here illegally, and most of the people who came here legally over the last 20 years, they're working in wage-earning jobs. That's why wages have flatlined. And we have, unfortunately, two political parties, with most of the candidates in this field for some form of amnesty, some form of allowing people to stay here, even though they're here illegally, and for increasing levels of legal immigration. I'm someone who believes that we need to be the party that stands for the American worker. And when we say we need to send people back, I mean we send people back. And let me just make one point. I was in Storm Lake, Iowa, the other day, near a Tyson's plant. 91% of the kids that go to elementary school there are minority kids. And they said, well, what are you going to do with all these people, their families? They've lived here for a long time. I said, I'm going to give them a gift. I'm going to give them a gift of being able to help the country they were born in. And we're going to export America. The education they were able to receive. They learned the English language. They learned about capitalism. They learned about democracy. You want to stop the flow of immigrants? Let's send 6 million Mexicans, Hondurans, Guatemalans, El Salvadorans back into their country so they can start a renaissance in their country so they won't be coming over here anymore.
Senator Santorum, thank you. Governor Huckabee, former chairman of Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mike Mullen, has said the greatest threat to our security is our national debt. Our national debt is now on pace to top $19 trillion. Yet you, as well as Ms. Fiorina, have laid forward no plan to reform entitlements. How can you say you're going to pay down our country's debt without cutting Social Security or Medicare?
Well, first of all, let's just remember that Social Security is not the government's money. It belongs to the people who had it taken out of their checks involuntarily their entire working lives. For the government to say, well, it's the fault of working people that we have a Social Security problem. No, it's the fault of a government that used those people's money for something other than protecting those people's accounts. So let's not blame them and punish them. But here's the fact, and I sometimes hear Republicans say, well, we're going to have to cut this and extend the age. And you know what I think a lot of times when I hear people say, well, let's make people work till they're 70. That sounds great for white-collar people who sat in a desk most of their lives. You ever talk to somebody that stood on the concrete floor for the first 40 years of their working life? You think they can stand another 5 or 10? Many of them will retire virtually crippled because they worked hard. And we're going to punish them some more? I don't think so. Here's the fact. 4% economic growth, we fully fund Social Security and Medicare. Our problem is not that Social Security is just too generous to seniors. It isn't. Our problem is that our politicians have not created the kind of policies that would bring economic growth. And I still support strongly that we get rid of the 77,000 pages of the monstrous tax code, pass the fair tax, supercharge this economy with the rocket fuel that happens with the consumption tax, and we don't have to cut Social Security to any senior who has worked their lifetime for it.
Thank you, Governor Huckabee.
We're going to continue this conversation. We're taking a quick break, and then coming up, the candidates' plans for strengthening the middle class. We are live in North Charleston with the Republican presidential debates. We'll be right back.